Hello, I'm Papa Biceps. You're watching the Thorin YouTube channel. And remember, don't fuck with Papito.
If I say the name Gilbert, odds are most of you are too young, too caught up in modern culture to think of one of the early movies in the oeuvre of Johnny Depp, or Gilbert Gottfried, the guy who did the voice of Iago from Aladdin, numerous other movies, Problem Child, love you mate. Also, probably going to be in a comedy gulag one day for some of the shit he said in the modern day on Twitter. But no, in the CS esports context, you will be forgiven for thinking of Jordan Gilbert, aka Nothing, legendary, one of the most famous North American Counter-Strike professionals of all time, from CSGO primarily, but from the end of 1.6 as well. But actually, in the early days of CS, for the first, say, 6-7 years, if you said the name Gilbert, especially as a surname, we all thought instead of a guy called Jonathan Elude Gilbert. His alias was Elude. Now, he had a brother as well that he played with in a team, Matt Gookie Gilbert, and there was actually even a third Gilbert. I believe his name was Brad, and he actually played with them in Source. They were all teammates. They all played for a team called Tech, a team that actually did not have an official name, so it wasn't the Elude clan or whatever people called it. Now, the reason why this is notable is because this guy was one of the best North American Counter-Strike players for a number of years. If we're talking like 2003 into 2004, he was one of the best. He was one of the more skilled, one of the star players, one of the ones where if you look at all the games he played, he showed a high level. The problem is, and this is the tragedy of Elude, is he had some pretty poor, for his overall career relative to where he was, offline placings at the CPLs, the Cyber Athlete Professional League, which were the big majors held in North America, which was his region. He didn't play for a team with great sponsorship, so these were the big tournaments that he needed to prove himself at to get that accolade, that status of really being one of the best players, because doing it on LAN was the big thing back then. All that needs to be said is he never once managed to place top 8 at one of these tournaments. These were tournaments that were like 128 teams, 256 at times. All the best teams went there from North America, most of the best Europeans. You went there, it was a big LAN, double elimination, single game, best of one, maps decided by the which round of the bracket you were in, and he never once managed to face top 8. So let's talk about some of the results that his team had, and then explain the situation. So in the early days, Tech were no-namers. No one knew these guys at the first CPLs they went to, but their breakout came at the 2002 CPL Winter event, the last major of 2002. This is the one you might remember, was won by Team 3D most famously, beating out Game Online in the final, the first major won by an NA team. Now at this tournament, the Tech team went with Elude, Gookie, his brother. His brother was often the in-game leader. A few players you won't know, but the most famous player on the lineup actually was a player whose name superseded the lineup. It was a player called Funk, the infamous David Funk, who I'll probably make a video about himself one day. A player who'd clan hopped from many different teams, in part because he didn't get along with a lot of people. He also wasn't an amazing player, but, he also could rub people the wrong way. And so he would get kicked from teams. He would try and kick people. He would leave teams. He would always go for the grass is greener scenario. And most notably, a year earlier, this was the guy where, in one of my esports anecdotes, I'll probably tell this story, he'd had his computer destroyed in revenge for kind of screwing his team over. And he'd played in a team with Jaden and DeBears, Elite Underground. So as a result, this guy was known in the scene, but in an infamous context. So playing for Tech, people were already thinking, he's gone to another team, has he? Who the fuck's this team? They're not going to do anything. But amazingly, this team actually managed to place top 12 at the CPL. A very unexpected placing ahead of many much better teams from North America and Europe, funnily enough, and ahead of many teams much ahead of them in terms of the Cal Invite, the online portion of North American player, and status of placings there. They then went on the next year, because of this placing, they kicked Funk, he left, whatever. They managed to actually make a move in Tech to bring in some better talent. They brought in Ice Salmon, who was a former Riot Squad player, Jaden and DeBears, formerly of Team 3D, and these were the players, if you remember, who'd been in Elite Underground with Funk, and they'd failed at CPL Summer 2002 with 3D, and therefore they'd been booted out because obviously Bullseye, Rambo, and K-Sharp are motherfucking legends who've had come to top placings, so they viewed the newer guys as the problem. So these players came in, and these guys were hungry to beat Team 3D because the Bears and Jaden wanted revenge. So they went to a LAN in 2003 called Killer LAN. This was a tournament where the first place was $10,000. And famously, because of Team 3D's poor experience at Click Arena in France a few months earlier, they chose to attend Killer LAN and what they thought was a guaranteed $10,000 for just NA teams, rather than go to the first ever ESWC, which became a major, was a legit LAN, but they couldn't trust that another LAN in France is going to pan out. So at this LAN, the notable moment was Tech was able to beat Team 3D. I think they even beat them twice to win the LAN, in doing so making Team 3D look silly for attending this LAN just to win the guaranteed money because it wasn't so guaranteed, also granting DeBears and Jaden some revenge over Team 3D, and more importantly, becoming the first North American team to beat 3D on LAN. 3D were the reigning CPL champions. At that CPL, they'd torn up a bracket full of NA teams to do so, and they were full of these legendary players from the NA scene who were the royalty of NA. So no one thought an upstart team, especially not with their cast-offs, was going to beat this squad. Then, with this great performance of one of the best teams in the world, they came into a tournament that used to be held before the CPLs in the summer, which was called the Lethal Gamers Pre-CPL Boot Camp, where you'd go as a BYOC, you'd bring your own computer, you'd boot camp there, and they'd play a little LAN tournament there. It was nearly always just the NA teams generally playing. At this tournament, they finished second. So things are looking really good. Going into this CPL summer for 2003, people are thinking, hey, this team could finish fucking hell, the sky's the limit, right? Top 5, top 3, maybe they're even a threat to win the tournament, to take down top European teams. I remember Gottfrag was ranking that they were going to come top 3, top 4. At the tournament, they failed this tournament so fucking hard. I think they actually just lost like 2 out of 3 games and went out in 25th to 33rd placing with a lineup that was supposed to be really good. Remember, they'd beaten 3D on LAN. They lost most notably to Forsaken, which was a squad led by the very same Funk that had left their team. So Funk got his revenge. Actually, Elude would later say this was a match that taught him a lot, because since him and his brother were talking mad shit to Funk the whole time in the game, he felt like it psyched them out and they lost the game. Later on, they lost to TSG, a decent enough NA team, but you know, a solid squad. They were the ones that had like all right placings, but they weren't supposed to be as good as Tech, and so this showed some of the flaws of this team. Now, I forget what tournament this took place at, but this is the team that also had some of the DeBears curse. DeBears, remember, never finished top 16 at CPL until years later at CPL Winter 2005. They also had a moment at this LAN where Jaden tried to drop someone a gun and accidentally dropped it behind the metal railing on Inferno, where you couldn't pick it up on a key round. So you can see everything that could go wrong did go wrong. This was a skilled squad. It was a good squad, but they bombed the CPL. And that kind of was the theme of Elude's career, because after this, people left the team, well, elsewhere. These players, Jaden DeBears, eventually had good placings, and Elude was stuck in Tech, and he had to then rebuild squads with his brother, typically out of rising talents. Find low-level Cal Invite players, or players you've tested on LAN, played in other lower-level teams, playing in the smaller teams, the Game Wises, the GSXs of the world. Bring them in, try and build good squads, have decent online performances, go to the CPL, and really get the big placings. So at that winter's CPL for 2003, they had a solid enough placing. They took in a bunch of these young players, some of them LAN proven. They finished 13th to 16th. Hey, that's not bad, right? Losing to some pretty good squads along the way, beating some NA squads. Next year, they come along. They had an Everland tournament, which was a big NA LAN, not the size of a CPL, where they actually had a placing that was much worse than it should have been. They finished 7th to 8th, but that's because they lost to the NOA team of Element and those guys who actually won the LAN. And even then, they beat NOA on a map. Then they went to the CPL summer event. They didn't perform very well there. Again, they didn't have the greatest lineups. At CPL Winter 2004, they finished 25th to 33rd again. Poor performance. And this was actually, they'd re-upped with some players. They got Jaden back. They actually had Moses, the same guy you see on CSGO casts. Unfortunately, in this particular tournament, they just ran into really good squads. They ran into SK, the German one, which was actually, I think, the game which allowed them to get like a half-decent placing. And they lost to Big Grip, which was like Khan and DSN and a bunch of really skilled players. And these were both really close games. In fact, I think the Big Grip game was even the one where Moses had the insane like 1v5 or 1v4 or something, even though they lost the game. So that was kind of a heartbreaker. Beyond that, later on, Elude would go to a Source LAN. CPL Summer 2005 actually had a Source tournament as well. He went there playing with his brother, some other players that people would know from 1.6. They placed third, but it was in Source. It wasn't 1.6. They got back together in Tech for 1.6 for CPL Winter 2005. Placed 17th to 24th there. Not that great a placing overall. After that, he got disillusioned. He went off and played World of Warcraft, other games, came back a bit in 2008 and played in like CEVO and some LAN qualifiers with the Evil Geniuses team, which by this point had moved on well from being a North American team, a Canadian team rather, to just being generally a North American team. And then this is before they later on went to be a different squad. Now, the thing about Elude was he was a strong player. He was a skilled player. He was a star player in the NA scene. But mainly due to his online performances. Online, he was nuts. Now, apparently, I think people even said he had a very good internet connection, and he lived in Texas, so he was in the middle of the country, which meant better pings and better routing. Okay, but still, he was a really nuts player online. I mean, in Cal Invite play, which was the highest level of online play, his team had like 4 seasons where they managed to place top 4. Funnily enough, they never won an online season, despite being called onliners. They never actually made the final of an online season. Typically, they lost to 3D a lot, even though in group stage play or regular season play, they often got upset wins over 3D, which is part of what built their record. They even had one season in 2004 where they went 15 out of 16 games in terms of wins, 15-1, and still did not manage to win Cal Invite, still didn't go deep, because you know what? Those nerves that got to them on LAN got to him in the playoffs of Cal as well. So unfortunately, Elude's rep was built that he's a really skilled player, but he's an onliner, and on LAN, okay, he's not going to do anything at CPLs, is he? So who gives a fuck? The problem with that is that's all he really missed, was that big CPL placing to really showcase who he was. And because he then had the rep as an onliner, famously, he actually had a falling out with Gottfrag because they gave him some sort of like silly community award of like most overrated player or like worst LAN choker or something. And he got really pissed off with this and actually like said, I won't give you my demos anymore. Now, the problem is, he was a bit of a choker, and he also had some team issues and well, and some very bad luck, but he did kind of choke at those CPLs. He wasn't as good a player as he was elsewhere, and his teams certainly weren't as good. But the bizarre thing is, as I said, he won the Killer LAN. He was great online. He attended many small LANs, some of which had very good teams at them, placed highly, won some of these small LANs, attended lots and lots of LANs as well by this. He's a very LAN-proven player, but something about the performance anxiety didn't ever really do it at the big CPLs. Now, to be honest, I think he should have just left after those first couple of years and joined another team like many NA players did and been a better player. Problem is, he was very loyal to his brother. He wanted to stay in tech. He built it with him. It wasn't until about 2004 the team even got any sponsors at all. Before, they wouldn't even get to the CPLs, except for the fact that they went to local qualifiers, which would then lead into a regional qualifier, and they were winning and placing top at these and getting the CPL spots and then traveling to the CPL. Now, Elude, despite his poor LAN performances, was a popular player, in part because he went the clever route, like a number of players did, Bullseye, De Bears, of releasing lots of really good POV demos. In the days when HL TV demos weren't very good, and POV demos were way better. And so as a result, he released most of his POV demos that he ever did good in on Cal Invite. He made 2 frag movies. I'll link 1 or 2 of them if I can find them. One of them was pretty good all in all. When he did play online, like he played in the Cal Draft League, where they drafted players to all different teams, that's another way he built his name in the early days of tech, tearing that up, beating up a bunch of really good players who were on these other squads. He was in numerous all-star games because he was a popular player, he was a skilled player. Sadly, he's one of those examples of someone where, for some reason, he couldn't get over the hump. He never got the real placing he needed. Even people like Jaden and De Bears got their placings, similar kind of tragic stories to some degree, but Elude never did. Either he was in good form and his team wasn't good enough, or his team was good and then they and he didn't do well, or he had lesser squads later on. So could have been much more, was a skilled player. I hope people don't forget about him entirely. That was the other Gilbert that we knew in Counter-Strike. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Eddie Wingfors, Daniel Yordanov, Robert Baxter, Travis Greb, Kyla Harris, James Harding, Caesar, and special thanks go out to Matt Shakowski and Jerky's Minion in particular. Want teasers for my upcoming content? How about asking me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want to take part in a discussion about esports with me? How about suggesting a topic or a guest for my content? Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today.